Well, hey there. You've stumbled upon the intersection of internet quandaries and psychological insight. Welcome to Veritas Views on AITA, where the quirks of the internet meet the expertise of Veritas Psychology Partners.
Thanks for joining us. I'm your host, Michael McBride, and I'm joined by our dynamic duo of psychologists.
Hi, I'm Dr. Gayle MacBride, and with great pleasure, I welcome you to the show, Dan Kessler, psychologist, business partner, and friend.
Thank you for the introduction, Gayle. Super excited about being here to hear. You know what? I this opportunity to like banter about important stuff is pretty cool. So
it's so much fun. We do it even when we're not recording podcasts.
Yeah, I know. We're like. We did shortly before this, we were discussing something similar. But anyway, all right. Michael, you have a question for us about whether someone's an asshole.
As always.
Answer that.
For anybody who's new out there, if you don't know what am I the asshole is, in short, someone on the internet has put forth a scenario and said, who's the asshole? And hoping that they'll get fair and honest feedback from the internet, which is, always to be expected.
A dicey bet at best.
In this case, I'm going to put it
to be fair and honest feedback. Better than the internet.
I agree. I think you guys do a very good job. So I'm going to put it in front of Dan and Gayle, and we'll see what they come up with.
Well, you think we do a good job because we have limited amount of information, and what we say makes sense for the information we have, but it's a great opportunity to remind listeners that our determinations, judgments, perspectives are always limited by the information made available to us, just as in the therapy room.
And by the fact that we're only getting information typically from one person in a complex scenario, and sometimes that information is as to some degree biased, of course, by their own perspectives. So,
anyway.
All right, Michael, go.
Please.
Absolutely. That's a really good reminder to everybody, and it's thank you for that. But also, if you're new and you're like, wow, what did I just stumble into? The other thing you have to look forward to is after the credits, read by our cousin, Kelly Carruthers-Buttrick, there's a bonus conversation. So there's even more conversation after it sounds like everything's wrapping up. But for now, neither Gayle nor Dan know this particular topic that I've found for them. Let's go. This is what we got. Today's is, am I the asshole for calling a girl overdramatic when she was crying after rear-ending me?
Yes.
Did we both say yes?
We did at the same time.
At the same time, yes.
At the same time.
Yes. Unless there's something really, really, really some of these we look at this and go, well, we really need to hear the context of this. I am struggling in my head right now to come up with a context in which you're not the asshole, original poster, and I haven't even heard the story yet. But we
probably should. Can
you think of a story though, Gayle, off the top of your head, that makes him not an asshole?
No, and I guess I'm gonna do a little bit of self-disclosure here. Probably less so now, but earlier in my life, I was someone who was quick to tear, and it didn't take a whole lot. And being called overly dramatic or sensitive would have pissed me the fuck right off. Like there is no way that was going to be productive, because my tears were about an emotion, but not, calling someone over dramatic tends to be an accusation that you are falsely creating those tears to create an opportunity to spotlight yourself. And as someone who has had that experience, that was the last thing I fucking wanted.
Yeah. And some of us do. Some people do get teary sooner than others do. And I'm really struggling to find an opportunity. But all right, let's hear the story. But
we really should hear the rest of the story, because we were talking earlier about limited facts.
He sounds like an asshole. Based on the title alone. All right, Michael, please share us a context that might possibly mitigate this guy's already seeming assholeness.
I'll do my best. I'll read what we got here. So, and I do want to apologize if you happen to hear a terrible noise in the background. It is our cat Griffin playing with a toy and just like flinging it around with wild abandon. So I had to mute myself.
It's good that Kelly mentions these cats in the closing credits.
We usually attribute them as children to the interruptions, and in this case, it might be the cats creating the interruption. But Griffin is a joy to watch. So I understand not wanting to displace her from this fierce hunt she's on.
All right, so here's what we have. Last weekend, I attended my brother's college graduation. After the ceremony, I found the rear of my trunk had been hit. The other driver was still there. She was an 18-year-old who was crying hysterically while her mom tried to calm her down. The girl apologized profusely and said she had overestimated how much room she had to back out and hit my car. I wasn't upset because mistakes happen. Asked if she had insurance, and she was too worked up to answer that. So I turned to her mom, and she said yes. They go get it, and as we call the police, so there'd be an official report for the insurance company. No problem. I am keeping my cool. I have no problems. The girl was really worked up, though. I kept trying to tell her, it's fine. Don't worry about it. I'm not mad. Accidents happen. I've had these things occur all the time. It's not a big deal. She's still a mess when the cops show up, though. I found this a little overdramatic and admittedly rolled my eyes. I obviously don't know this girl, but it was beginning to feel like she was trying to manipulate her way out of trouble, even though
Mhm.
the cop and I both said things happen, the insurance would likely take care of it. Eventually, the police leave. Um, then I get in my car and I'm ready to leave. My sister was with me the whole time. She told me I was unnecessarily mean to the girl. I said she was being over dramatic for no reason, especially as no one yelled at her the whole time. My sister pointed out this girl was likely a new driver, probably worried she ruined whoever was there to celebrate. Plus, she was worried about her insurance rates going up, and anxiety and who knows what else. I didn't have to be a dick about it. I should have shrugged it off and let it go. So far, her insurance has been cooperative and seems like this will all be resolved rather quickly.
Okay.
The
So wait,
subject
wait, wait. Okay, go ahead, please continue.
Almost done. The subject came up at a party we had for my brother. Most of my family thought I was being a dick, though some agreed she needed to calm down. Who's the asshole in this scenario?
Absolutely, OP. I'm going to call you an asshole. Really, without a whole lot. Here is why. Because
Okay.
OP has made this about themselves, and this amount of tear and an emotional upset is not about the person's vehicle who got hit here. This is about the internal state of this young girl, this 18-year-old who, connected cars, however hard. This person keeps telling her to calm down. It's not a big deal. But again, they assume it's about them. They've made this about them and are not taking that moment to say, this girl is having an entire experience of her own. And it doesn't matter if someone else is saying, it's fine, I'm not mad about it. She's upset, and you're neglecting the fact that she's upset about this.
Yeah, you're totally spot on with there. Now, I would say that I wasn't as
And a
mad
little
at
passionate.
him. You did. I wasn't as mad at him after hearing the story. I mean, I'm still he's an asshole. Don't get me wrong. Let's be clear here. But I wasn't. 'Cause I thought based on the title that he had called her while she was like crying and weeping and all that an asshole.
It sounds like he may have.
You're being over dramatic. It sounds like he
He
implied
may have
by the eye
said
roll.
that,
If she
but
caught
then
the
didn't
eye roll,
recount it.
if she caught the eye roll, he was being that was certainly.
But he recounts the part. I think we are assuming that this is a he, but in the OP is discussing with sister after.
Are assuming it's a he.
Yeah, I think the assumption here is that OP is a male. So we've got some gender norms happening here, which is.
It is a correct assumption in this
Oh,
case.
okay.
He does identify as male.
But-
I'm sorry.
Okay.
It's just for pronoun use.
Right.
But he is then discussing it with his sister, and there is discussion that he called her overdramatic. So while he doesn't state it in the post about the series of events, he sort of implies that it happened, even if it's just. I think it was more than natural. I think.
I think what I'm curious about here is the first thing that made me go, because we talked before we even started about how some people give their unbiased perspectives. He described himself as just being super nice.
Yeah.
Like I totally understand. I totally get it. Like I like it's fine. It's okay. I just want to call the police to get a police report. It's fine. It's okay. And his only transgression he admitted to was an eye roll when the police, at some point in the police interaction. And then he said he gets back into the car where his sister was. So she wouldn't have seen the eye roll. And my question is, if you were being so super nice, why did your sister say you're being mean? Were you really being as nice as you think you were? Like there's something in here that is incomplete about his description of his interactions.
Yeah.
Because she'd be like, if he really was all that he described, like you would have gotten in the car and sister would have went, wow, you really handled that pretty well. Like you were so nice to her, even though she like damaged your car. Like it was really nice of you to not be a dick. But instead she was like, why were you being mean to her? And he was like, I'm not being mean to her. She was overreacting. Like, I'm not buying it.
Yeah, no, I do agree. And I think sometimes we think outwardly that we are being so nice or calm, and others don't see it that same way. There's almost this sort of emotion blindness, or we think we're doing a good job of containing that emotion. But nonverbals are really strong and can be, picked up on. But even I think both things are true. I suspect the OP is not nearly as nice and calm and collected and whatever as he thinks he is. And I think he also failed to realize that this girl's upset was not necessarily going to be calmed by anything that he was going to say, because she was involved in such of her own aspect of this, unless it was made worse by the fact that he was actually maybe more of a dick than he had insight into.
Well,
and then it is about him, and he needed to have been nicer.
Shout out to Gladys Quaxa here. Gladys Quaxa was my sociology professor back in 1980 something, and Gladys was quite elderly at the time, and I'm sad to say she's probably no longer with us. But shout out to Gladys Quaxa, who used to comment on leakage. I love the term. I haven't heard him use it. But he'll say, she used to tell people, like, there's some leakage going on here, meaning that you're letting your emotions show through in your body language.
Oh, I thought you meant from the eyes.
No. She called it leakage when someone was outwardly like, oh, yeah, I'm fine. And they were, and like, I remember her using this when some student was talking about something and their leg was really had suddenly started shaking much more. And she said, there's some leakage here of emotion. What's that leakage?
Oh, interesting. I
It's
like that
such
a lot.
Such a wonderful thing that Dr. Fox like it's something that it stuck with me for these many years. This idea of emotional leakage showing in our body language, and we see it in couples all the time. When someone thinks that they're being very reasonable, but their shoulders are up and they're a little tight, and there's an intent, and they're like, well, I'm being really nice. And like, no, it's really obvious to the person who loves you, who's known you for 15 years, that you're not fine.
I see this in individual work as well, where someone will try to convince me that they're fine. And then there is that nonverbal tell. And really? Or even just, I think it's interesting. And here's maybe our aside for today is, I'm sure you do this too, Dan, which is, or one of many, is when you greet your client and you ask, how are you doing today? Right? It's a simple question, and it gets asked a lot. And I remember from my college days in 1990, mid 1990s, I worked in an academic department. Boy, I'm going to take this even further aside for a moment. And one of the
Gladys Quaxa.
What's that?
Further than Gladys Quaxa?
Oh, no, I'm doing an aside to an aside.
Oh, okay. All right.
An aside to an aside. So that's why it's even further off. So I worked in an academic department it was actually the Department of History and Philosophy, if it matters. So I was a psychology student, but I had gotten this job, and there was a philosophy professor who was really interesting, Dr. Franks. And he just, philosophers, right? I mean, they're just an interesting bunch of people. And he was talking about how folks would ask you a question like, how are you? But not really listen to the answer. And so he sometimes would give a flippant answer like, fuck you, thanks. And he would kind of like keep going. He'd leave the intonation as if it was an appropriate response, but give an inappropriate response just to kind of fuck with people and see who is listening. And very often nobody noticed. Now, I think about this a lot because when I ask my clients, how are you doing? In part because Dr. Franks really alerted me to the fact that this question gets asked and people don't actually listen or don't want an honest answer, right? I listen to the answer because I'm a therapist, but because I'm also aware of this phenomenon. And so people will often come into my office and they will tell me they're fine, and there will be leakage where it will tell you they're not fine. They're really not fine. So why don't we try that again? How are you? And they will sometimes stop and go, oh, yeah.
No,
that's my aside to the aside.
No, but it's so true, and I think we're bringing this back to the original story.
What a good idea.
He thought he was handling it just fine, but what we know is that if he's telling her he's just fine, but his body language is not, his tone and intonation, all this other stuff, the words may be, I'm just fine. And our second aside here, how often does that happen when couples are having a dispute? And one of them says, well, I told her I was sorry, and she kept being mad at me. And it's like, well, how did you say I'm sorry? You say, like, I'm really sorry, I messed up, or like, I'm sorry, okay, I'm sorry.
Right.
One is an apology, and one is not an apology. One is shut up and stop giving me a hard time, and the other one is I'm sorry for what I did. And we get caught up in these words like I said I'm sorry when you didn't say you're sorry. Maybe you meant I'm sorry, but you said it because you're still angry in an angry tone, and the person who heard it is not I see this all the time.
Absolutely.
Where people will say, well, I said this thing that they wanted me to hear. Like I did this reflection task that you told me to do, and they stayed mad versus no, you didn't. And we get down to they use the words, but they totally miss the tone and intonation and volume and all the other things that communicate that are so much more important than actual words.
Yeah, I think it's really important to check within yourself what you're saying. Would you accept that if it were given to you by another person, especially in the case of I'm sorry? Would you accept that? I'm sorry, okay? And if you wouldn't accept that as an apology, that wouldn't feel good. It wouldn't heal the hurt or the pain. And maybe that's not the apology you should try to give. You maybe need to take another 10 or 15 minutes to let your own biology cool down a little bit so that maybe the intention of the sorry you would like to give can match up with the nonverbals, which is, I've really made a mistake and I'm really sorry.
And you talked about this idea of emotional blindness. In this episode or previous one?
I think we talked about it today.
I know we talked about it today. Yeah.
This
idea of emotional blindness.
Our short-term memory checked.
Maybe. But this, and I use this example, like with lots of people, have you ever closed the door? Have you ever been in the middle of an argument and tried to close the door gently behind you? It doesn't close gently; it slams. And then the other person's like, "Why did you slam the door?" And you're like, "I didn't slam the door." Not you, but it couples a lot. And then a couple gets in an argument about whether or not the person slammed the door. The reality is, if you're angry and you close the door behind you, you're probably going to do it with more force because we use more energy. And that we really need to be careful about how we move our bodies when angry and how we interact when we're angry. Because even if we're coming to a conciliatory point, unless we take a really deep breath and slow down and with intent, change tone, volume, etc., we're likely to come off still angry, and then that conciliatory moment may be lost because the words get lost behind the tone.
I absolutely 100% agree. And the other part of this story for me is, what do you do when, let's say, you're 100% there, your emotions line up with your nonverbals, and someone is still upset? Right. I think we have to be careful with other people's upset, because I think many of us are bothered by that, and we internalize it as if it's our fault. And it becomes hard to sit with someone when they're that upset, especially if we don't assess the situation as threatening or bothersome in the same way. And so how do you sit with that when someone is distraught and you don't get it, or you find yourself feeling defensive, like I didn't do this.
And almost no matter what the distress is, it is our habit to try to calm people down. It is not how, but it is human beings, when interacting with other human beings, will often say placatory things or messages intended to be reassuring, but that often feel invalidating. Like, oh, it's going to be okay. You're going to be fine. You'll find another this, or you'll do this. It's going to be okay. And calm down. And sometimes it's just so much better to sit with the emotion.
It is. And I think we also have to be careful about assuming that we caused that emotion.
Right.
right?
yeah,
I
back to
think
the
there's
story here.
right. I mean, I
Yeah,
don't
yeah. He
in
couldn't
this
calm her
idea.
down because he didn't cause the upset.
Right. And I get that, as a stranger, it's not necessarily his job to fix whatever that narrative is.
Right.
But he certainly could have taken an opportunity to hear it and to explore with her or sit with her as she is just, I understand these are really stressful situations and probably kind of scary. What is there anything I can do to help you right now? And honestly, moving toward that emotion. And I know you're like, well, I don't want you to solve it, but
I'm gonna disagree with you.
that's okay. That's okay. We can disagree, and that's fine. But to my point here for a
Yeah.
moment is sometimes when we move in the direction of the upset or sit with it with someone, that investment in time on the front end can save us on the back end. We can spend an hour and a half on something because someone is distraught and has trouble moving through all of it. Or we can spend 10 or 20 minutes just sitting with them in difficult emotion or,
Okay.
or being or something and maybe solve it in an hour total.
So
Like we get some time savings when we pay attention to human emotion.
I totally agree with you if we're talking about like someone in your life you care about. To sit with them and just let them emote for that time before doing any intervention or anything to try to resolve it. In this case, though, where I disagree is in this case with OP here, his role was to just like say, you know what, I'm totally cool. I'll be in my car when you need me. She's on the phone with her mom. Her mom's got this.
Sure.
Like he doesn't need to do anything other than
You're right. You're right. In my mind,
hey,
she was on her own.
No, she's on the phone with her mom. At this point, he can go, you know what? I'm just gonna call the police, get a police report, totally good. Like I'll be in my car waiting. You talk to your mom and I'll be if you have any questions, I'll be here. But like he just back off, get in the car, wait, chit chat with your sister the whole time. Now, if this is someone, if we're taking this out to our side, kind of a side conversation, and it's a friend,
or our made up facts, massage facts version of this,
with the same distress, then I totally agree with you. Listen to her, hear her out. Don't try to calm her down immediately. It's okay for her to have emotions. It's okay for the people in our lives to have emotions. Once she's had a chance to talk about it, really get it out, then you can like intervene in that loving, caring way that would help the person out. But they've got to get there. Sometimes people just need to tell their story.
Yeah.
Even if they have told it before, even if it's not important information, sometimes people just need to tell the story.
Yeah, no, I agree. I completely thank you for reminding me that mom was somewhere on the scene. I can't remember if she was on the phone or she was actually there, and it doesn't matter. She was present. But the massage facts version of this, if it's just he and she, even his response of, is there someone I can call?
Yeah.
Like get the phone. But I will tell you, I think most of the time from a police perspective, they now tell you stay in your vehicle.
Yeah.
Right? Like your job is not to interact because you can actually just make the scene worse. So we just also need to acknowledge that, when you have two strangers interacting around something like tense like this, that I think law enforcement recognizes that it can get problematic quickly.
So we're going to render a verdict here.
Ooh, we should.
He's an asshole.
He's an asshole.
Yeah. Yeah, he is probably.
We were not wrong in our initial first blush with this. Yeah. We could have just read the headline and been right. Well, instead we had this whole meandering conversation.
Yeah, at least he didn't call her say he's overacting. She's overacting to her face. Although the eye roll, if she caught it, says that without saying.
And I'm still not certain he didn't. I think he massaged the story as he posted it online to omit the words, but it seems to me when he told it to the sister, it was obvious. But the eye roll certainly made it obvious.
And the sister calling him out for being mean to her suggests that he's left something out either intentionally or through lack of self-awareness. And if we're going to assume positive intent, we'll say it's due to his own lack of personal awareness. But there's something missing from this story, or his sister wouldn't have said that. So
right. He lacked curiosity and he assumed this framework, which was she's being dramatic. And he needed to be curious about her emotional state. He wasn't. He just made a judgment.
I've had teenage drivers in my world. They get into accidents sometimes and often react very strongly with it. And I just can't get And this is yeah, he was being a dick. All right.
I'm laughing because you said that, and until you said that, I forgot. The first damage that I did to a vehicle was backing out of a garage in a Dodge Dakota 4x4. It was my dad's truck. And like my dad had wanted a truck for a long time. So like this was kind of a
and you weren't paying attention and the car wasn't expected to do that and you backed into it, right?
No. It was a tight fit in an older style 2-car garage. It was a tight fit, and I was on my way to an extracurricular activity. I think my parents weren't home. I backed out and I hit the side mirror on the side of the garage, or maybe it was the side of the truck. Now I don't remember.
Yep.
It was one of those things. Anyway, and I drove to the thing and I was so upset the whole time because I was just certain my parents were going to, my dad especially was just going to be pissed. And I came home and I fessed up, and I remember like, I probably was like that girl. I'm just like, and I was probably no more than 18, and it was all, tears, and I'm so sorry. And I just insane. It's probably raining that night or something like that. And he was like, it happens. Like it was bound to happen. We'll just get it fixed. Like it was like such not a big deal. It was kind of anticlimactic. So having been a teenage girl, like completely get this reaction and being totally wrapped up in something that you expect to happen and just didn't turn out that way. It was really okay. And I remember that moment of kindness, and I know that that's going to happen for my teenage driver, and I want to have that moment of kindness when it does.
Well, now that you've both rendered your verdicts, let me tell you what the internet said.
Please.
It really was, it was probably 60-40 split. 60% you're the asshole, 40% not the asshole. And it was funny the things that kept coming up in the comments. A lot of them, said you can't control emotions. Like, she's entitled to how she feels, and sometimes you can't even control them yourself. Like you don't know what she was going through. The telling people to calm down and chill never works.
Never.
You said, Dan, the best advice really would just be to say, like, really, I'm not concerned. I'm gonna go back to my car. I'm gonna do my thing. But by inserting himself and repeatedly telling her to calm down was not a good thing. A lot of people speculated, like as an 18-year-old, and they often impose their own stories, like yours, Gayle, where it was like, well, the first time I got in an accident, going through my head were things like my parents are gonna be mad at me, the financial burdens of repairs and insurance, the holy shit, I hit someone and they're going to be mad at me. Even if it wasn't a huge accident, hitting a car is a scary and kind of violent experience. It's unexpected and shocking. Police are here. Holy shit, I'm in trouble. Embarrassment about driving this car that is dented afterwards and having people ask what happened and having to relive it all over again. And, like all these things that come into that and that kind of emotional experience. The few people, I say the few, like I said, it was probably about 40% of the people who went with not the asshole essentially fell into the camp of, you didn't do anything wrong, which they overlook a lot of things, right?
He did.
Like you guys have
he
said.
may not think he didn't. He doesn't think he did anything wrong. But
I do love in this scenario, we have the sister's perspective. And, it's one of those, again, it's still filtered through him. So we're only getting the sister filtered through the guy who did this, his perspective of it. So we don't really know what the sister thought or said, but the very fact that he expressed a willingness to say something contrary to his perspective from his sister, like you said, probably means she had more to say about it even than what was displayed. But
right.
You said something that caught my ear, which is I just want to acknowledge the role of socialization here. We have a male poster saying your emotion is making me uncomfortable. Those aren't his words, but essentially calm down. You're being overly dramatic. think about it from a sociological perspective here for a moment, as males they tend to be socialized in a way, suck it up, don't feel emotion, close off from that. Right. And so now we have this guy following his sort of gender normed behavior of having this sort of uncomfortable reaction to emotion. Now, I'm not changing my verdict about asshole or not, but it's one of the things that we didn't talk about is how often males are socialized to shut down and distance from emotion. And that tends to be their reaction to others because that's the lens that they know. And so part of the vulnerability of being human and connecting to other humans is pushing beyond that box. And I think emotions, especially strong emotions, tears, they tend to be shut down. Be a big boy, don't cry, right? Be tough. And so I think there is a fair amount of that going on here for him.
Well, yeah, and it certainly is. It certainly is messages that the young boys often get. Walk it off, rub a little dirt in it, walk it off, cry, and I think it adds to that discomfort men often feel with their own emotions, and it extends to men with others often wanting to minimize or decrease emotions.
Right.
I love the idea of like let's normalize men crying.
Right.
So.
Yeah. So I just thank you, Michael, for sharing that from the internet, because I think that perspective was something we didn't do a good job of including. And I think we needed to talk about that a little bit today.
Yeah, sure. Well, thank you both for another riveting debate and a glimpse into the internet forums. Remember, morality is often shades of gray and not just black and white.
Emotions are tough things to sit with people, and they're really tough to watch someone else have when you're not at that same level. Be kind, be gentle, and maybe try sitting with someone's pain just quietly.
For sure. Please follow and share Veritas Views on any of the podcast platforms with your neighbors and friends. And as always, stick around through the credits for a bonus conversation. This week, we return to a glimpse into the objects in a therapist's office and where those came from.
You can follow Dr. Dan Kessler at Dr. Dan Kessler and Dr. Gayle MacBride at Dr. G. MacBride. Oh, and you can find them both at veritaspp.com. Credits. Tickling the Ivories, Matthew Reddington. Art, production, and design, bringing this show together with flair and finesse, Michelle Love. Recording and editing, turning chaos into something worth sharing, Michael MacBride. Intro, outro, I'm Kelly Buttrick, a VO talent who just happens to be Dr. MacBride's cousin. Cats, CJ, Linus, Sadie, and Griffin. Hosting by whomever lost the coin flip. Interruptions by all their children. The content of this podcast is for informational and educational purposes only and is not a substitute for professional mental health advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Listening to this podcast does not constitute a therapist-client relationship. If you believe you may be experiencing a mental health issue, please seek the assistance of a qualified mental health professional. If you are experiencing a mental health crisis, you can call or text 988 from anywhere in the U.S. to be connected to Crisis Mental Health Services.
Thanks for listening. As promised, here's that bonus conversation.
Okay, Gayle, we haven't done this things in our office in a little while. You've got a coffee mug that says World's Okayest Therapist. Please share.
I will. Thank you. This is a mug that I championed for a while. I really wanted. It was a gift from my dear husband and our podcast host. And what I had hoped it was going to say was World's Okayest Mom. But it works both ways. World's Okayest Psychologist, World's Okayest Mom. There was this time in my life where it was just really helpful to remember I wasn't going for this blue ribbon badge of the world's greatest anything. Because the reality is I'm never going to be the world's greatest mom, nor am I going to be the world's greatest psychologist. Though that moniker goes to a lot of really smart therapists and researchers. It's not going to be me. And if I spend my life pursuing this idea of great, I will forget to be really satisfied and work with okay. Yeah. And okay is okay. And I like this even from the Yerkes-Dodson law of performance, right?
Right,
You need
right.
enough push to be activated and interested, but not so much that you freak yourself out. And so there's this lovely, distribution curve of just the right amount of anxiety to push you to do your peak performance. And I really thought between those two things, it was really important for me to keep in mind that I wanted to be the world's okayest psychologist. And in doing so, I actually would sort of in that way level up my performance and be a really good psychologist.
That's
So
wonderful.
it is a reminder to myself. I sometimes show it to my clients to remind them as well. We're not going to get this great level. It's unlikely, but we can optimize our performance by just being good with okay.
Perfect.
Well,
Thank
well,
you.
and I would say, best shifts and changes, in terms of different aspects of what you do for sure. So,
Oh, and then you get into, am I really doing the best I can? And, the reality is, we're all doing the best we can in the moment that we're in with the information we have and, and maybe the psychological resources we have in any moment. And that varies sometimes day to day and maybe hour by hour. So, it again, it's just a reminder. Let's shoot for okay. Okay is good enough.
yeah. Well, thanks for tuning in. Tune in again next week for a whole nother Am I the Asshole debate.
We love hearing from you, so please review us on Apple, Spotify, or, well, wherever you're listening. If you enjoyed this podcast, please review, like, and follow. Also, give it a share. This helps us reach more listeners.